Have you ever stopped to think about how a parent, after dedicating their entire life to raising their children, can end up feeling like a stranger in their own family as they age? It's a reality many elderly parents quietly endure, and today, we're sharing a story that touches on this emotional journey. In this video, we take a deep dive into the life of Mrs. Clara Hayes, a mother who encounters unexpected challenges when she moves in with her son, Michael, and his wife, Jessica, in the bustling suburbs. Clara's story sheds light on the complex dynamics of family relationships in modern society and the unique struggles faced by elderly parents who find themselves at odds with their children's fast-paced lives. As we follow Clara through her journey, we'll uncover the heart-wrenching realities that many seniors face, feeling unwanted, isolated, and misunderstood, despite the outward appearance of a picture-perfect family. Clara's experience not only highlights her pain but also opens a window into the broader challenges of aging and the critical importance of emotional support and empathy for our elders. This is more than just a story. It's a powerful call to action for anyone who cares about building stronger, more compassionate relationships with aging loved ones. By the end of this video, you'll walk away with invaluable insights into how we can better respect, understand, and care for those who have given us so much throughout their lives. So, stay tuned. Don't miss the transformative lessons this story has to offer. Trust me, it will change the way you think about family, aging, and the responsibilities we hold toward one another. If you're not already subscribed, now is the perfect time to hit that subscribe button and activate the notification bell so you never miss a video. Your support means everything, and if this video resonates with you, please like and share it to help spread these meaningful messages. Now, let's begin this poignant and thought-provoking journey. As Clara and her son, Michael, strolled through the neighborhood, they chatted about his life and the changes he had made since moving to the city. Before long, they arrived at Michael's new home, a spacious, sunlit house nestled in an upscale suburban neighborhood. The exterior gleamed with fresh paint, and the manicured lawn framed the modern architecture. Michael, brimming with pride, opened the door and gestured warmly. "Mom, come in. This is our new home. Isn't it amazing?" Clara stepped inside, her eyes widening as she took in the sight. The house was impeccably decorated with sleek, modern furniture, high-end appliances, and polished hardwood floors that gleamed under the natural light streaming in through the large windows. Every corner of the house spoke of sophistication and affluence, a world so vastly different from her cozy but modest home in the countryside. While Clara was still marveling at her surroundings, a young woman appeared from what seemed to be a home office. Dressed in trendy, elegant attire, she carried herself with a confident air. This was Jessica, Michael's wife. Michael turned to his mother with a smile. "Mom, this is Jessica, your daughter-in-law." Clara offered a warm smile and extended her hand. "It's lovely to finally meet you," she said, her voice kind and welcoming. Jessica returned the smile, but Clara couldn't shake the subtle tension in her daughter-in-law's demeanor, a flicker of unease that passed quickly but didn't go unnoticed. Still, Clara chose to focus on the positives. She reminded herself that she had just arrived and needed time to adjust to this new chapter. In the following days, Michael and Jessica went out of their way to make Clara feel welcome. They cooked elaborate meals, taking turns trying new recipes and even tailoring dishes to Clara's tastes. They accompanied her on leisurely walks through the nearby park and took her shopping at the local mall, where Jessica insisted on buying herself a new coat for the cooler city weather. For the first time in years, Clara felt pampered, as though she were living in a dream. But as the days turned into weeks, Clara began to notice a shift in the atmosphere. Though Michael and Jessica remained outwardly polite, there was an underlying distance that grew harder to ignore. Jessica, in particular, seemed uncomfortable around her. Her smiles felt forced, her tone distant. Whenever their paths crossed in the house, Jessica's eyes darted away as though avoiding prolonged contact. One night, unable to sleep, Clara overheard muffled voices coming from Michael and Jessica's bedroom. Curious and concerned, she quietly moved closer to the door. The words she heard cut through her heart like a cold blade. "Why does your mom have to make everything so awkward?" Jessica's voice was laced with frustration. "She's been on my case all day. It's exhausting." "Jess, she's my mother," Michael replied, his tone firm but tired. "She's just trying to help. Can't we be patient?" Clara's chest tightened, her breath catching as tears welled in her eyes. She turned away, retreating to her room, feeling as though the walls of the house were closing in on her. The warmth and joy she had felt upon her arrival now seemed like a distant memory. That night, she lay awake, her thoughts a whirlwind of sadness and uncertainty. Had she become a burden? Was her presence disrupting the harmony of her son's life? The next morning, Clara made a quiet but resolute decision. She couldn't bear to be the source of tension in Michael and Jessica's marriage. It was time to return to her home in the countryside, where she could reclaim her independence and peace. Though Michael and Jessica continued to treat her with outward kindness, the joy Clara had initially felt had faded. The bustling city that had seemed so exciting at first now felt cold and unwelcoming. Clara began to long for the simple comforts of her old life, a place where she belonged without question, where she could live without feeling like an outsider in her own family. Clara woke up early, as she always did, her internal clock tuned to the rhythm of her life in the countryside. She had always found mornings to be the most peaceful part of the day. Today, she decided to help her son, Michael, and daughter-in-law, Jessica, prepare breakfast. Quietly slipping into the kitchen, she paused for a moment, taking in the sight of shelves neatly stocked with every spice and ingredient imaginable. It was clear that Jessica had already been up and busy. "Oh, Clara, you're up early," Jessica said, her voice tinged with surprise as she turned from the counter. A smile quickly followed, sweet but slightly perfunctory. "Isn't it nice to sleep in a bit? You don't have to get up so early here." Clara chuckled softly. "Oh, as we get older, we sleep less. It's just the way things are." If you are still watching this video and find these lessons useful, please comment 1 below to let me know that you are still here with me. Jessica nodded but seemed slightly distracted, her attention already back on whatever she was preparing. Clara's smile lingered, but inside, a pang of discomfort grew. Despite the warmth of Jessica's words, Clara felt a subtle barrier. This wasn't her kitchen, her home, or her life. She began to wonder if she was intruding, a misplaced presence in the carefully balanced lives of her son and his wife. When breakfast was ready, the three of them sat down together. Michael scrolled through the news on his phone, engrossed in an article, while Jessica casually painted her nails at the table. They exchanged the occasional comment, but the room felt quiet, almost detached. Clara's gaze shifted between them as memories of her simple life in the countryside flooded back. She thought of neighbors stopping by to share a cup of coffee, the laughter of children playing outside, and the comforting hum of a close-knit community. Here, in the quiet modernity of this house, she felt an ache of loneliness. After the meal, Clara instinctively began to gather the dishes, her hands moving with practiced ease. But before she could finish, Jessica stepped in, gently taking the plates from her. "Clara, don't worry about this. You're here to relax. I've got everything under control," Jessica said with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Clara paused, momentarily startled, then nodded. "All right, if you insist. I think I'll go for a walk." She slipped on her coat and stepped outside. The air was crisp and fresh, carrying a faint scent of blooming flowers. A nearby park caught her eye, and she decided to explore. The greenery and birdsongs were a welcome respite from the monotony of the house, but even as she sat on a park bench, watching families and joggers pass by, the sense of loss crept back in. In the countryside, she had always found solace in her garden or chatting with her neighbors. Here, surrounded by strangers, she felt adrift. As she sat there, lost in thought, a familiar voice broke through the stillness. "Clara? Is that you?" Looking up, she saw a woman approaching, her face lighting up with recognition. It was Mrs. Harper, an old neighbor who had moved to the city years ago. The sight of her brought a wave of comfort. "Mrs. Harper." "I can't believe it," Clara exclaimed, rising to greet her. The two women embraced warmly, and Clara quickly filled Mrs. Harper in on her situation. She spoke of the initial excitement of moving in with her son, the growing sense of isolation, and the struggle to find her place in their busy lives. Mrs. Harper listened intently, nodding in understanding. "Oh, Clara, I've been there. These young folks, they're always so busy with work, their schedules, and their own families. It's hard for them to make room for anyone else, even their parents. But you can't just sit at home feeling lonely. You need something to do, some way to stay connected." Clara nodded, feeling a glimmer of hope in Mrs. Harper's words. "You're right. I can't keep feeling like this. Maybe I should look for ways to meet people and keep myself busy." Mrs. Harper's face lit up. "There's a senior activity group at the community center just down the street. I hear they've got everything from art classes to fitness groups. Why don't you check it out?" The idea sparked something inside Clara. "That sounds wonderful. Maybe I'll look into it tomorrow." The next morning, with a renewed sense of purpose, Clara headed to the community center. She signed up for a dance class, imagining herself gracefully moving to music and making new friends. Her heart swelled with anticipation as she entered the studio, but the sight before her caught her off guard. The room was filled with young women, dressed in colorful, form-fitting outfits that exuded energy and confidence. They laughed and chatted as they stretched and prepared for the class. Clara hesitated at the doorway, suddenly feeling out of place. She clutched her purse tightly, unsure of what to do. Before she could turn to leave, one of the women, slightly older than the others, approached her with a kind smile. "You must be new here," she said warmly. "Are you looking to join? Everyone's welcome." Clara smiled, grateful for the kindness, but still felt unsure. "I was hoping for something a bit more low-key." The woman nodded in understanding. "Don't worry. There are plenty of other groups here, too. Let me help you find something that fits." Clara felt a wave of relief. While the experience wasn't quite what she expected, it gave her hope that she might yet find her place in this unfamiliar city. Shortly after Clara stepped into the dance studio, an energetic instructor approached her with a puzzled look. "Ma'am, are you sure you're in the right place? This class is for advanced contemporary dance," the instructor said, glancing at the vibrant group of young women warming up with stretches and lively chatter. Clara's face flushed with embarrassment. She realized she had misunderstood the description of the class. This wasn't the senior-friendly activity she'd envisioned, but a rigorous session designed for young, agile participants. She clutched her purse tightly, her first instinct to retreat and avoid further awkwardness. As Clara turned to leave, a woman in her late 40s, slightly older than the other participants, approached her with a kind smile. "Hey, don't feel bad. If you're interested in dancing, there's always room for you here," she said gently. "The instructor can make adjustments, and we all support each other. It's never too late to try something new." Clara appreciated the warmth of the woman's words, but the embarrassment still lingered. She forced a smile. "Thank you, that's kind of you. Maybe I'll try another time." As she left the studio, her thoughts weighed heavily. Living with Michael and Jessica had already proven more difficult than she had anticipated. Outwardly, they were polite and accommodating, but Clara had long sensed their growing impatience. It was clear she didn't belong here, and the failed attempt to join the dance class only deepened her feelings of displacement. One afternoon, as Clara was tidying the living room, her foot caught on the edge of the rug. She stumbled and fell, hitting her knee hard against the corner of the coffee table. Pain shot through her leg as she cried out, unable to stand. The commotion brought Michael and Jessica rushing into the room. "Mom, are you okay?" Michael's voice was filled with concern as he knelt beside her. "Stay still. I'll call a doctor," he said, already dialing on his phone. Jessica hovered nearby, offering support. She fetched a cold compress and applied it gently to Clara's leg. "Don't worry, Clara. The doctor will be here soon," she said, though her tone carried a subtle edge of reluctance. Clara noticed the faint hesitation in Jessica's voice, a reminder of the unspoken tension that had grown between them. When the doctor arrived, he examined Clara carefully, determining that she had a minor sprain and some bruising but would need to rest in bed for a few weeks to recover fully. "No more moving around for now, Mrs. Hayes," the doctor advised with a firm but kind tone. "Let your family take care of you." Michael nodded. "Mom, don't worry. Jessica and I will make sure you're comfortable." Clara smiled weakly but felt uneasy. Over the following days, Jessica's demeanor began to shift. Though she initially helped with Clara's meals and medications, her patience wore thin. Small requests, an extra pillow, and a glass of water, were met with curt responses or long delays. Clara began to sense Jessica's growing resentment. She tried to minimize her needs, but even this didn't seem to help. One night, as Clara lay in bed, she woke up feeling parched. Her throat was dry, and she hesitated to call for Jessica but eventually decided she had no choice. "Jessica," she called out softly, "could you bring me a glass of water?" From the other room, Clara could see Jessica scrolling on her phone, the faint glow illuminating her face. Jessica didn't respond. Clara called again, but Jessica continued to ignore her, feigning obliviousness. After several minutes, Clara sighed and swung her legs over the side of the bed, determined to get the water herself despite the pain. She struggled to her feet, clutching the bed frame for support. Just as she shuffled toward the door, Michael returned home. He spotted her immediately, his face darkening with concern. "Mom, what are you doing? You shouldn't be walking around." Clara tried to smile through her discomfort. "It's nothing, Michael. I just needed some water." Michael's gaze shifted to Jessica, who still sat on the couch, her eyes glued to her phone. "Why didn't you help her?" he demanded, his voice low but sharp. Jessica looked up, startled, guilt flashing across her face. "I didn't hear her," she said quickly, her tone defensive. Michael frowned, motioning for Jessica to join him in the hallway. "We need to talk," he said firmly. Jessica hesitated but followed, her shoulders tense. Clara sat back down on the bed, her heart heavy. She didn't want to be the source of conflict between them, but knew she couldn't ignore the growing strain her presence had caused. Behind the partially closed door, Michael's voice was low but stern. Jessica's replies were clipped, her frustration evident. When they returned, Jessica's expression was sour, her movements stiff. She avoided Clara's gaze and left the room without a word. Michael sat beside his mother, gently taking her hand in his. "Mom, I'm sorry," he said, his voice filled with regret. "You shouldn't have to go through this. I'll make sure things are better." Clara gave his hand a reassuring squeeze. "Michael, I don't want to cause trouble between you and Jessica. I just want to find a way to make this work." But as she lay in bed that night, staring at the ceiling, Clara couldn't shake the feeling that perhaps things weren't meant to work. No matter how much she loved her son, this house no longer felt like a home. Clara looked at Michael, her hand resting gently on his. "Michael, I know this hasn't been easy for you or Jessica. I don't want to make things harder," she said softly, her voice tinged with resignation. "I'll find a way to solve this problem. Don't worry about me." Her words were calm, but her eyes betrayed a storm of emotions. She didn't want to embarrass her son or cause a rift in his marriage, yet she knew deep down that her presence had disrupted the balance of their lives. She patted his hand gently. "Son, don't trouble yourself over me. One day, when I'm gone, I'll finally return to my roots. If you are still watching this video and find these lessons useful, please comment 2 below to let me know that you are still here with me. That night, Clara lay awake, her thoughts drifting back to the countryside. Memories of her modest home, her garden, and the friends she had known for decades filled her mind. The warmth of those memories contrasted sharply with the cold, disconnected atmosphere she now felt. She realized it was time to make a decision, for her peace and her family. While Clara recovered from her injury, doubts and insecurities lingered in her mind. She wanted to talk openly with Michael and Jessica to address the growing tension, but fear of sparking further conflict kept her silent. She stayed in her room most days, trying to stay out of their way. One afternoon, as Clara watched a television program, muffled voices outside her door caught her attention. The voices grew louder until they turned into shouting. Alarmed, she opened the door and saw Michael and Jessica in the middle of a heated argument. Michael's face was flushed with anger. "Jessica, do you even think about anyone other than yourself? You spend money like it grows on trees. What's wrong with you?" Jessica shot back, her voice sharp. "It's my money, Michael. Why do you feel the need to control everything I do? You're the one who's impossible to live with." Michael threw up his hands in frustration. "You're unbelievable," he muttered, slamming the door as he stormed out of the house. Clara stood frozen, her heart sinking at the sight of their fractured relationship. Jessica turned and noticed Clara standing there. An awkward smile flickered across her face. "Don't mind us, Clara," she said, her tone strained. "We just have our bad moments." Clara's gaze softened, but she decided to address what had been on her mind. Stepping closer, she asked calmly, "Jessica, tell me the truth. Are you two fighting because of me?" Jessica hesitated, her usual composure faltering. "No, Clara, you're overthinking. We've just been under a lot of stress, that's all." Clara sighed, recognizing the deflection. "Jessica, I know I've caused trouble. I can feel it. You don't have to pretend." For a moment, regret flickered across Jessica's face, but she said nothing. Clara opened her mouth to speak further but stopped herself, knowing that some truths were better left unsaid. Later that evening, Michael returned home, his face clouded with guilt. He noticed Clara and Jessica standing silently in the living room. "Mom, Jessica, I'm sorry for earlier. I let my temper get the best of me. I don't want us to live separately or in conflict. This is your home, Mom." Clara shook her head gently. "Michael, you don't need to apologize. I know you both have your own lives and challenges. That's why I've decided to return to the countryside." Michael and Jessica stared at her in shock. "Mom, don't be upset. You belong here with us," Michael pleaded. But Clara's decision was firm. "Son, I know you and Jessica are good people, but my staying here has caused too much tension. I don't want to see you two unhappy because of me." Jessica remained silent, her expression conflicted. Michael lowered his gaze, knowing deep down that Clara was right. The unspoken stress of her presence had taken a toll on their marriage. A week later, Clara packed her belongings, her heart heavy with regret. As she left the house, Michael hugged her tightly. "I'm sorry, Mom. I wish things had turned out differently." Clara smiled weakly, patting his back. "Don't worry about me, Michael. Just take care of yourself and Jessica." The train ride back to the countryside was quiet. Clara stared out the window, the bustling city gradually giving way to rolling fields and small towns. She thought about the sacrifices she had made as a mother and the distance that had grown between her and her son. Her heart ached, but she resolved to find peace and purpose in her old home. When Clara stepped off the train, the familiar sights and smells of the countryside welcomed her like an old friend. The golden glow of the setting sun bathed the fields in warmth, and a gentle breeze carried the scent of wildflowers. For the first time in months, she felt a sense of belonging. "Clara, is that you?" a voice called out. She turned to see Mrs. Harper, an old friend, carrying a basket of vegetables. "What are you doing back here?" Clara smiled, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "I've come home. The city isn't for me. I want to spend the rest of my years here." Mrs. Harper nodded knowingly. "I always say, the city might have its charms, but nothing beats the peace of the countryside. Let me help you with your things." The two women walked together, chatting and reminiscing. When they arrived at Clara's old house, it was just as she remembered, small, weathered, but filled with character. As she stepped inside, Clara's eyes welled with tears. The simple surroundings felt like a warm embrace. Over the next few weeks, Clara settled back into her old life. She reconnected with old friends, sharing meals and laughter. The village, though quieter now with many young people working in the city, still held its charm. The days passed peacefully, and Clara felt her spirit healing. Back in the city, Michael couldn't shake his guilt. He often thought about his mother's loneliness and the helplessness she must have felt. One evening, he turned to Jessica. "What did we do wrong, Jess? I feel like we failed her." Jessica sighed, her tone softer than usual. "I think we let her feel like a burden instead of family. We could have done better." Michael nodded. "We can't just leave her alone in the countryside. Let's visit her and make things right." The next morning, Michael and Jessica packed their car and drove to Clara's home. When they arrived, they found her laughing with friends, her face glowing with happiness. Seeing her like this, Michael felt a mix of relief and sorrow. He stepped forward, determined to mend their relationship and show his mother the love and respect she deserved. When Michael and Jessica stepped into Clara's old house, they were greeted by an unexpected sight. Clara was sitting on a well-worn armchair surrounded by a small group of elderly neighbors. The room was filled with laughter, the clinking of teacups, and the comforting hum of friendly conversation. Clara's eyes sparkled as she shared stories, her voice animated in a way Michael hadn't seen in years. Michael and Jessica stood frozen in the doorway, watching the scene unfold. Their mother radiated a happiness that felt worlds apart from the reserved and lonely woman they had known in the city. A pang of guilt hit Michael hard. Turning to Jessica, he murmured, "She's happier here than she ever was with us. I never saw her smile like that in our home." Jessica, her own eyes clouded with regret, whispered back, "Did we fail her? Have we done so little?" Michael sighed heavily. "We did. I thought providing for her needs, money, a roof over her head, was enough. But I completely neglected what she truly needed. She needed connection, purpose, and joy, not just material comfort." Jessica fell silent, her mind replaying the moments when Clara had tried to engage with them, offering to help cook, joining them at the table, and how those moments were brushed aside. "So, what do we do now?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. Michael took a deep breath, determination in his eyes. "We apologize. We own up to our mistakes, and then we figure out how to make this right." They stepped into the room, their presence catching Clara's attention. She looked up, and her face lit up with surprise and joy. "Michael, Jessica, what brings you here?" "Come in, sit down, have some tea," she said warmly, gesturing to the chairs nearby. Michael and Jessica sat down beside her, feeling a mix of shame and resolve. Michael took Clara's hand gently. "Mom," he began, his voice low and steady, "we came to apologize. We didn't take care of you the way we should have. You deserved so much more, and instead, we caused you pain." Clara looked at her son, her expression softening. She smiled, though her eyes glistened with emotion. "Michael, Don't be so hard on yourself. You and Jessica have your own lives, your responsibilities. I never blamed you." Jessica's voice broke as she spoke. "But you should have, Clara. We made you feel like a burden. I didn't treat you with the respect and kindness you deserve." Clara reached out, patting Jessica's hand reassuringly. "It's all right, dear. You're admitting it now, and that means everything to me. I forgive you both." If you are still watching this video and find these lessons useful, please comment 3 below to let me know that you are still here with me. In the days that followed, Michael and Jessica made regular trips to the countryside. They helped Clara with chores, joined her on walks, and spent evenings talking and laughing together. Clara's life brightened in ways she hadn't expected, and the villagers took notice. They praised Michael and Jessica for their effort, calling them devoted and caring children. Clara felt proud, knowing her family was slowly healing. But life, as it often does, brought another challenge. Michael received an urgent notice from work requiring him to travel abroad for a month, and Jessica's job made it impossible for her to stay in the countryside for an extended period. The two were left with a difficult choice: leave Clara alone in the countryside or bring her back to the city. Clara, sensing their dilemma, spoke up one evening. "Michael, Jessica, you don't need to worry about me. I can manage just fine here. You both have jobs to do, and I don't want to be a burden." Her words were calm, but Michael caught the faint hesitation in her voice. "Mom," he said firmly, "we can't leave you here all alone. It's not safe." Jessica nodded. "We can rent a bigger place in the city, with a garden for you to enjoy. That way, we can work and still take care of you." Clara hesitated but eventually agreed. Though her heart ached at the thought of leaving the countryside again, she wanted to make things easier for her children. Once back in the city, Clara found solace in her way. Every morning, Clara rose early, donning her gardening gloves and heading to the backyard. The plot of land was barren at first, but she wasn't deterred. With seeds, tools, and determination, she turned the space into a thriving vegetable garden. Rows of tomatoes, cucumbers, and leafy greens soon filled the yard, bringing life to the once empty space. Each evening, Clara would call Michael and Jessica outside to help her pick the ripest vegetables. The three of them laughed and chatted, sharing stories about their day while filling baskets with fresh produce. The simple act of gardening became a bonding ritual, strengthening their connection as a family. Michael and Jessica marveled at how much joy the garden brought to their mother. "She's amazing," Jessica said one evening as they watched Clara inspect her plants. "It's like she's found her purpose again." Michael nodded, his heart full. "And we're lucky to be a part of it." For the first time in a long while, the house felt warm and alive. The atmosphere of tension and guilt was replaced by love, laughter, and the shared satisfaction of nurturing both the garden and their family bond. As we've seen through Clara's journey, life is a series of lessons about love, connection, and finding purpose at every stage. Her story reminds us of the importance of cherishing the relationships that matter most, listening to our loved ones, and understanding the deeper needs beyond material comforts. Whether it's through a small gesture of kindness, creating shared experiences, or simply spending quality time together, there are countless ways to strengthen the bonds that define us. Now, we'd love to hear from you. What have you learned from Clara's story? Was it about the importance of appreciating our elders, the value of independence, or maybe something more personal? Take a moment to reflect and share one thing you've learned from this video that you'll apply in your own life. Your insights might inspire someone else in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, please leave your comment below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Your support helps us continue bringing meaningful stories and lessons to you. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.